They said the river ran slow where Willow Bend bent with it, that the current thickened there the way grief slows a heartbeat. On certain evenings, the Alabama water went black as a mirror turned to the wall, and the bottomlands breathed out a damp that tasted like iron. Men blessed their crops and averted their eyes from the patches of old forest that nobody cut, not for fear of superstition, they'd insist, but out of a practical respect for the dead. Creek graves slept in that timber, and even the boldest hunter disliked the feeling of his boot heel on a place that remembered him. In the first fall after 1843, a carriage from town set down a widow at the steps of that house by the bend. She was Helena Prescott once, and then Helena Rutledge, and at 27 she had already outlived a husband who fell from a horse and snapped his neck as cleanly as a stick of kindling. The doctor swore the man felt nothing. Helena felt everything and showed none of it. She accepted the house, the fields, the ledgers, the enslaved souls, 63 in all, and the debts small enough to ignore. Between the river and the cotton, a fortune waited. Most women would have sold or married again before the mourning veils began to yellow. Helena dismissed the overseer within a fortnight, declined 3 replacements, and informed the people she owned that she would manage what the law said was hers. The announcement traveled through the cabins like a cold draft. It meant a new kind of watching. Willow Bend was brick, shipped up from Mobile and stacked into confidence. 3 stories, galleries hushing the heat, 12 rooms below and 8 above, and beneath it all a cellar that stretched the length of the house, a vaulted belly cut into the red earth. The previous owner had called one chamber the wine room, though he trusted his bottles to a smaller space under the kitchen. The big room kept a different kind of cool, the kind that makes a voice sound like a stranger's when it comes back to you off stone. Helena learned the house quickly. She rode alone. She read by lamplight until the lamp turned meek before dawn. She made errand days to Montgomery and attended not to dressmakers but to lawyers, to the county clerk, and, oddly, to a German cartographer who drew maps with a scholar's patience and a watchmaker's hands. The enslaved people learned her routes the way one learns the weather. They took measure not of her smiles, which were rare, but of her silence, which was reliable. The first change was a bucket and lye soap. "Scrub it," Helena told Esther, who cooked for the main house, pointing at the wine room. "Walls, floor. I want the brick to remember water." Esther worked 2 days with her daughter Celia in the lantern's sour light. The room gave back their breath and kept its own. Damp earth, old stone, the metallic ghost of something that had once rusted there. When the brick gleamed to Helena's liking, she asked for 4 chairs placed in the center, set facing one another like conspirators at a table no one could see. No lamps, she said, no candles. That March night, the covered carriage arrived near midnight. Isaiah, who slept over the carriage house and knew the language of hoofbeats, heard it first. 3 women stepped down, cloaked against a mild night, moving as if the air itself might bruise them. Helena met them at the door. She did not lead them to parlor or dining room. She led them down. Celia's cough would not leave her that spring, a dry little rattle that made the dark longer. She slipped to the kitchen for water. The door never locked, and paused when she caught voices from below, 4 women speaking, in a tone that was not prayer and not conversation. Helena's voice was the river of it, smooth and precise. The others joined and departed like smaller streams. The words were measured and foreign, a language that refused to sit beside any dialect Celia knew. She recognized the cadence of learning, the memory of a page recited by a tongue trained to it. Then Helena spoke in English, and the words landed in Celia's bones. We bind ourselves to the purpose. We bind ourselves to the method. We bind ourselves to the future that will not be denied. A silence followed, one of those true silences that shackles a room, then the sound of paper turning, many sheets, many hands. A second sound began, metal on stone, steady as a clock with no face. It ticked for a quarter of an hour, and then stopped with the exactness of a resolved equation. The first mark is made, Helena said. The first boundary is established. Celia left without water and lay awake until the rooster, eyes open to the ceiling, feeling the house under her like a live thing. At breakfast, Esther poured coffee for a mistress who looked as composed as a portrait and noticed the mark on the wrist, small as a coin, black as lamp soot, 2 lines crossing, a circle at the juncture. It drank light instead of reflecting it. Esther looked away before she was seen looking. The pattern declared itself the way a fever does, by recurrence. Every 3rd week, the carriage near midnight, the heavy cloaks, the descent to the cellar, words in that disciplined, unplaceable tongue, paper turning, something tapped on stone. During the days, Helena burrowed deeper into the library. New volumes arrived, old books, their spines abraded and their pages foxed, written in alphabets Benjamin could only half name when his eyes strayed over them in the act of dusting. A curl of Greek here, a graveyard of Latin there, letter forms that looked like branches in snow. Helena practiced sounds under her breath, rounding syllables the way a jeweler rounds an edge. She changed her household, too. She drew 7 of them close to the house: Esther and Celia, Isaiah, Moses, who had survived long enough to see patterns repeat, Rachel, young and restless, Thomas, the keeper of tools, and Benjamin, a boy with clever hands and a quiet pride he hid in his throat. Field hands called it a privilege. The 7 learned quickly that proximity was its own kind of lash. They swept the floors after the midnight gatherings and found tiny drifts of ash, the sweep of scratches on brick in deliberate geometry. Sometimes the room was warmer than it should have been, as if heat could soak into stone like worry into a face. They watched Helena go to town and return with the wrong parcels for a widow. Legal papers, printed broadsides, packages heavy as a sleeping cat. She met for hours with the German mapmaker, with a lawyer whose name was all polished mahogany, with a physician for no evident ailment, with a Yankee printer whose press made a noise like rain on tin. None of it added up to tea and sewing and the brittle charity work expected of women with money. Benjamin found an answer, because boys do the daring thing before the smart one. Helena stepped away from the library and left a book open, a binding old enough to smell like dust and cloves. He slid his fingertips under the cover as if the pages might bite and read a dozen lines in an English older than his own. A true account of the mysteries practiced by the women of the Carpathian territories and their methods for achieving influence beyond natural law, compiled by Brother Augustine, Year of Our Lord, 1721. He read about circles of women in cold countries who did not petition saints or devils, but worked like mathematicians with words and time, and as the monk had it, blood contracts. Symbolic, he insisted, not butcher's work. They pursued outcomes in a world that refused them outcome, past knowledge as fragments so no paper could betray a whole. Probability, not miracle, the monk muttered through his quill. Method, not magic. Benjamin closed the book when the latch clicked upstairs and slid it into place with a care that felt like prayer. In June, 5 women came instead of 3. A light went down with them this time, not flame, but a cold phosphorescence, blue-white and steady. Isaiah lay flat in the grass at a ground-level window, warped by age, and the glass made the light lozenge-shaped and strange. He saw 6 women sitting hand to hand, the big book open on a stand in their circle, the script on its pages so dense it looked like a field of black seed. Helena lifted a small silver blade, and, for a heartbeat, Isaiah braced himself for what men do in cellars. Instead, she cut her own palm and let 3 drops fall. The paper drank them. The others followed, 3 each, 15 in all. The words shifted into English. The 6th mark is made. The 6th boundary is established. We approach the completion that will secure for us and for our daughters what no law and no man will grant. Isaiah felt the certainty in her voice as a physical thing, and, for the first time, believed that whatever lay ahead would arrive on time. By September, the heat had retreated to the low places, and night air came cool through the cane. Helena's movements changed. She stopped making pretense for neighbors' sake. She calculated in the library until the room smelled like ink more than air. The whisperers in town said she had gone odd with widowhood. Oddness in a rich woman is called taste. Esther served tea to 2 visitors, come earlier than decency would demand, and heard their voices lift and fall on legal phrases, timber deeds, wills with too many commas, fathers who loved the wrong child on paper. When one woman groaned about a brother-in-law with lawyers like wasps, Helena's answer left no room for skepticism. When we complete the 7th mark, such claims will fail. The binding ensures it. The timing, she assured them, was exact the moon in her proper quarter, the planets where they must be, the days counted like beads. It is science, Helena said, and made the word sound like a door. On the 19th she summoned the 7, and for the first time spoke to them about the night to come. Stay in your quarters, she said. Do not approach the house. Do not listen. Any disruption could undo months of preparation. She looked at each of them as if memorizing their faces for a future in which they might matter differently. I have treated you fairly. In a house built upon an injustice, fairness is a story the powerful tell themselves. When they want to sleep, they promise to stay where she asked. Then they prepared to break their promise. On the 21st, she ate with a precision that made Esther uneasy. Herbs named in Latin, bread from a specific flour, tea from leaves that smelled like mint, had learned Latin too. Helena consulted a watch between bites, as if she were aligning her body's clock with the heavens. When the carriage arrived at 11:30, 6 women stood for a moment at the white steps and whispered in English about calculations and courage. The house took them in. Lamps glided from window to window like careful ghosts and then disappeared down the stair. Midnight came and passed without a sound. In the cabin, the 7 felt a pressure build in the air, a weather that existed only for them. The taste of copper, the small bones of the ear adjusting to an altitude that had not changed. It was too much to bear in ignorance. Celia slipped into the dark. The rest followed, drawn by the wire in their chests toward the ground-level window and the blue-white glow below. The scene was terrible in its tidiness. 6 women sat in a circle, eyes closed, hands joined. 7 candles were placed in a geometry the brain recognizes before it can name. Papers lay scattered with orderly abandon. The large book was open like a mouth. Helena spoke, and her speech moved from a preface into doctrine. We establish boundaries through will and word and witness. We claim what the law denies. We bind outcomes beyond our own lives. Another voice took the cadence, smooth as if they had rehearsed for months. They had, insisting they were not calling down angels or devils, but applying principles those before them had described and tested. A third voice asserted what they believed, that human will, focused and properly timed, could tilt probability the way a hand tilts a glass, not spilling the water, just bringing it to the lip. Helena opened her eyes and reached for the knife. One woman, their voices had names now. Esther had learned to pin them to faces, hesitated. Once we make this 7th mark, she said, there is no undoing. We bind ourselves as we bind our fortunes, the others pledged. Helena cut deeper this time. 7 drops, counted aloud. Each woman bled 7 drops, 42 in all. The paper glowed faintly where the blood disappeared, as if some reagent lay hidden in the fibers and woke at the touch. Helena lifted a token, small and metal, and each woman raised an answering piece. Our connection to the land, Helena said, engraved with its description. She set them on the blood-soaked passages in a pattern, took up a small silver hammer, and struck each once. The ringing made the cellar feel smaller. By metal to metal, by blood to intention, by word to outcome, we forged the binding. Then language became vibration, and the hair on Benjamin's arms rose. The blue-white light swelled until the air itself seemed to bend the way a road shimmers at noon. It lasted as long as a held breath, then released. Helena closed the book with a snap that would have sounded like finality in a different church. "It is done," she said. "We wait for the manifestation. 6 lunar cycles. No thunder, no heat, no angel in the corner demanding witness, only a pressure gone from the night and a cool, clean breeze sliding over the cotton like a hand smoothing a dress." The women gathered their papers into cases too fine for such work, reclaimed their tokens, turned down the strange lantern phosphorus or some cousin of it, and climbed the stairs. "Secrecy strengthens," Helena told them at the door. "Exposure weakens." The carriage rolled, and the crickets took back the yard. In the cabin, the 7 argued softly with the urgency of people trying to decide which world they were living in. Maybe it was theater that hardens the mind for battle. Maybe it was planning masquerading as prayer. Maybe, Rachel said, the most dangerous thing in the world was a clever woman with too much time to think about losing what was hers. Esther listened to the echo of the hammer in her head and said, "Or maybe we can't see yet." Moses said what the old say, when the choice is between power and survival. We watch, we remember, we live. They watched. A letter came from Savannah with an inheritance improbable as a fish in a tree. Helena received it with the satisfaction of someone hearing a clock chime she had wound herself. When a lawyer marveled at her fortune, she said, "Some things are meant to be," and looked not at God, but at her pocket watch. The German returned with maps, and with the quiet zeal of a man who has checked his numbers 4 times. The alignments had been perfect, he assured her. The historical precedents Helena had sent him to dig from dry European archives were numerous. 13 women across 3 centuries, he said, whose fortunes tilted after such work. Coincidence, he offered politely. Design, Helena corrected. November gave them a case in the papers. Mrs. Drummond seized a shipping concern from a partner who thought himself a storm. The ruling contradicted precedent, but not the stack of documents her lawyers produced with the inevitability of tide. 6 lunar cycles since the binding. A coincidence is a coincidence until it happens again and again. By the 17th, Sarah Vaughan's daughter inherited a head of sons. By December, 2 more women from that cellar had their cases resolved, as if led by an invisible usher. A deed clarified, a loan granted, a guardianship decided in a mother's favor. By March, the tally had become a private liturgy among Helena and her circle. 11 of 13 for one, 9 of 11 for another, 14 of 15 for Helena herself. The pattern is undeniable. Mrs. Drummond said over tea that pretended to be a social call. "We do not reinforce," Helena answered. "We coordinate. The method holds." The 7 in the long cabin felt their understanding wobble on its axle. If all this was psychology, then psychology wielded a blade sharper than any they had seen. If it was something else, then the world was not the world they had been forced to learn. "Maybe it doesn't matter which," Esther said. "It matters for telling it," Moses answered. "People will believe planning. They will not believe a cellar bending the air because 6 women said old words." They decided to write. Benjamin took up a stump of pencil and a scavenged sheet and set it down as if dictating to a future. Dates, voices, marks, the smell of iron in June, the shimmer in September. The way the pressure left the night like a sigh. Moses corrected for memory's vanity. Esther, for its fear. They hid the pages under a loose board and wrote again when the paper allowed. The discovery came in a sweep of Helena's hand under a bed. She found the pages and read without raising an eyebrow. The 7 stood in a row and could feel the easy bones behind their skin. When she finally spoke, she sounded more weary than angry. "You think you have caught something," she said. "You have caught its shadow." She did not deny the ceremonies. She repositioned them. "Lawyers," she said, "do worse. Doctors do stranger. This is natural methodology. It binds not by magic, but by attention, by timing, by the solidarity of women who will not be dispossessed." She fed their pages to the kitchen fire sheet by sheet and watched until the ash lay fine and anonymous. "You will tell no one, not because anyone would believe you,
Because I prefer my neighbors to sleep untroubled. Esther dared a question she could not swallow. Did it work?
Helena smiled, the quick, private smile of someone who has gambled months of her life and seen the dealer push the winnings her way. Look at the world, she said. Decide for yourselves. Remember that correlation is not causation. Remember also that refusing to accept the limits men hand you is the oldest spell there is. She left them that. It was not an answer. It was a sentence to live in. The river bent and went on. The cotton went to gin and to market. The forest kept its graves. In parlors across the county, the story, when it was told at all, was tidied into eccentricity, as if a widow's odd habits could be filed beside the fashion for Egyptian bracelets or blue china. In the county courthouse, a clerk slid a record into a drawer and turned a key, then turned it again when 50 years had passed, then found another drawer to hide the key. 3 names bled out of the ledgers entirely, as if silence could eat a person whole. And still, the thing persisted the way stubborn truths do, in margins and in memory. A symbol glimpsed on a wrist at a church picnic. Small and dark and exact. A mapmaker who died certain of his numbers. A lawyer who woke at night newly irritated by the idea of chance. A boy who'd become a man and could still taste copper when the moon hit the right window. A woman who had once crouched by a ground-level pane of glass and grown old enough to know that sometimes the world changes with a shout and sometimes it changes with a ledger. Years would pass before anyone cared to open the drawer. Perhaps no one ever would. Perhaps the only record worth trusting was the one that lived in 7 bodies that learned how to carry what they could not say. They went on, cooking, mending, driving, fixing, reading when reading meant punishment, and writing when writing meant fire. They kept a careful living archive in their mouths and fingers the exact angle a silver hammer lifts before it falls, the way air bends when certainty is spoken with enough courage, the way power prefers to be called method when it wears a woman's dress. If you stand by the bend at dusk when the river blackens and the live oaks begin to count their own rings, you might feel it if you are the kind to feel such things. A pressure, faint as a hand on a shoulder. A taste, bright as a bitten coin. It is not a haunting, it is a reminder. The house that once stood there learned something in its cellar and taught it to the ground that there are laws and there are rules, and then there is the stubborn arithmetic of will. Some call it superstition because superstition is easier to forgive than strategy. The rest of us, standing in ordinary air, must decide whether to believe in the shimmer or in the ledger, or in both at once. Either way, the night holds the memory. 6 women, a knife that shone like water, a book that swallowed blood without a stain, and 7 people pressed to a small pane of glass, learning, on a September that still hasn't ended, the exact shape of a secret